Unit 10 Global Warming and Climate Change. 10.0 Introduction. The changes in Earth's weather patterns as a result of global warming can be noticed all over the globe. Many of these changes have never been seen or experienced before, are causing profound effects on humans. Global warming has a cyclical effect on our environment. As the Earth is warmed from the increasing presence of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, this causes glaciers to melt, which raises sea levels worldwide. Also, global warming causes the permafrost to melt, which releases vast stores of methane gas, thus further enhancing climate change. Human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels since the start of the Industrial Revolution, have increased atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. There are several natural causes of global warming, which humans are not directly responsible for, such as volcanic eruptions, forest fires, etc., which release large amounts of methane gas and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. So, global warming is taking place, and unless we change our habits and our dependence on fossil fuels, our planet will become permanently altered even further. The government, international/national organizations, state and local governments, large and small industry and businesses, non-governmental organizations, and individuals need to make concerted effort to educate the public, children and youth, to combat the problem of global warming and climate change, as it can exacerbate the damage both to the natural world and to human communities. Thus, effective policies are essential if reduction of global warming is to be brought under control, and reducing the carbon footprint and promoting environmental care. To arrive at global solutions, it is necessary to address human attitudes and behavior towards environment. Hence, focusing on sustainability is the only way forward, as it will help to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own goals. United Nations, 1987. In this unit, we will know the impact of human activities on climate change and global warming. The significance of advocacy of collective sense of competence among different communities is emphasized. Lastly, new techniques for green infrastructure and green spaces will also be highlighted. 10.1 Global Warming and Climate Change. Global warming and climate change refer to an increase in average global temperatures. These phenomena have been occurring since the beginning, as there have been periods of heating and cooling of Earth's atmosphere. It can be described as a struggle between human progress, in the form of industrialization, population increase, and economic growth, and nature, which will not only affect the atmosphere and the sea but also the geology of the Earth. As predicted by the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Earth's mean temperature has already increased by 0.6 degrees Celsius in the 20th century, IPCC 2013. The emissions of carbon dioxide due to the excessive use of fossil energy will change the climate and will result in increased temperature up to 3 degrees Celsius. It might be accompanied by an increase of extreme climatic events, and alteration of global precipitation patterns. This will cause huge changes to the civilization, but the impact on the society is extremely uncertain. The term global warming can be traced back to at least the mid-1970s and can be defined as an increase in the temperature of the troposphere, which has occurred in the past as a result of natural processes but is now believed to be accelerating as a result of increased emissions of greenhouse gases associated with the burning of fossil fuels. Schneider 1989. Even though several greenhouse gases occur naturally, but their atmospheric concentration has increased in the last few years. There are several reasons for the same, some natural and some produced by the humans. Natural phenomenon that contributes for global warming are volcano, ocean current, Earth's orbital change and solar variations. The human causes are deforestation, increase on the use of fossil fuel, mining etc. Figure 10.1 mentions the framework regarding the causes and consequences of global warming. The recent human-caused emission of greenhouse gases are the highest in the history, which will have a widespread impact on the human and natural environment. The UNFCCC defines greenhouse gases as those gaseous elements of the atmosphere, both natural and anthropogenic, that absorb and re-emit infrared radiation. Anthropogenic emissions create four principal greenhouse gases that are carbon dioxide, CO2, methane, CH4, nitrous oxide, N2O, and the halocarbons, a group of gases containing fluorine, chlorine and bromine, which accumulate in the atmosphere, causing concentrations to increase with time. The atmospheric concentrations of all these gases have significantly increased since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in 1750, and their concentrations have increased to an extraordinary level in at least the last 800,000 years. Weldon, 2011, articulated the theory of global warming by stating that humans are burning too much fossil fuel, which is producing vast amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide and many other atmospheric gases, some natural and some man-made, act like a one-way heat filter which allows sunlight to pass freely from outer space into our atmosphere but prevents heat from the planet from re-radiating freely into space. Thus, without the heat filtering processes of these gases, the Earth's average temperature would be approximately 30 degrees cooler. Scientists believe that global warming will change the environment in several ways. One, cold seasons, or winter seasons, might become shorter and warm ones to become longer. 2, northern latitudes are likely to have wetter autumns and winters, and drier springs and summers. 3, more rainfalls are predicted in the tropics, and subtropical areas could become drier. 4, a shift in the climate zones around the world which might bring a change in the frequency and intensity of floods, droughts, typhoons, tornadoes and hurricanes in many areas. 5, rise in sea levels might cause more hardship and losses. 10.1.1 Debates about global warming and climate change. Due to the lack of scientific evidence, many people did not believe that global warming was taking place. Today, global warming is an issue that does not involve much controversy in terms of its existence. However, the argument over the causes, impact, and responsibility of global warming is a topic of conversation and research. The most reliable data to prove that global warming is taking place was found deep inside the glaciers, in form of ice core samples. Scientists could drill out core samples from glaciers and determine the greenhouse gas concentrations in Earth's atmosphere from 400,000 years in the past, ca. 2007. Their data reveal that the level of carbon dioxide has been steadily rising for the last 15,000 years, and most dramatically since the Industrial Revolution first began pumping large quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, ca. 2007. Willy Dansgaard, Claude Lorius, and Hans Eschger are three scientists who have documented more than 150,000 years of global climate change by analyzing glacial ice core samples and were awarded the Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement in 1996. They mentioned that analyzing the ice was like sticking a thermometer backwards in time, as the composition of ice itself tells us about the temperature and atmospheric conditions at the time the ice was formed. The idea of examining Earth's climate history from ice core samples was first proposed in the early 1950s, which was followed by the first deep ice core drilling project which took place in 1966 in Greenland. Drilling and analyzing the ice core sample is a complex process which involves a lot of planning, people and preparation time. Data from ice core samples is still being collected and analyzed in Greenland and Antarctica by a group of multinational scientists. Evidence from these ice core samples also show a linear trend in increased greenhouse gas emissions which parallels the worldwide population growth. If population growth is a contributing factor for the rise in greenhouse gases emission, then humans are partially responsible for global warming. This is until scientists can better understand Earth's natural changes in its climate cycle. Thus, till then, it will be unclear to what degree human action has accelerated global warming. Scientists have mentioned that Earth naturally goes through cycles of warming and cooling, correlated by carbon dioxide, CO2, levels rising and falling. Thus, there have been a steady 20% rise and fall of CO2 over time from a mean of 240 parts per million, ppm. But in the present times, all indicators are going off the scale as the current greenhouse gases concentrations are higher than at any time in the last 400,000 years, according to data accumulated from the Vostok Ice Core in Antarctica, CARE, 2007. Furthermore, recent data has shown that carbon dioxide emissions have risen 30% since 1900, which is a 10% increase over Earth's natural variations in the levels of carbon dioxide. Possibly even more shocking is that until 1999, 2 gigatons of carbon dioxide have been released into the atmosphere annually. Furthermore, since 2000, 6 gigatons have been added to the atmosphere. Thus, according to that, there is a threefold increase in carbon dioxide emissions from 1999 to 2000, which might result in destructive consequences in the form of recent extreme weather patterns, Tolit al. 2000. Some of the consequences that we are already witnessing due to global warming are ice melting at the Earth's pole, sea level rise has become faster over the years, and precipitation has increased across the globe. Some of the species such as butterflies, foxes, plants have moved farther from the north to higher cooler areas due to the warm weather. Climate change is primarily a scientific topic which poses a high risk to humans and social systems, and probably one of the most controversial one because of its inherent scientific uncertainty. Bjornberg, et al., 2017. The theory of climate change assumes that an increase in global mean temperature, defined as global warming, may influence the climatic conditions of the world. Climate change is more than global warming because the rise in average temperature is only one indicator of broader changes such as extreme temperatures, drought, flooding, storms, rising sea levels, impacts on food production, and infectious diseases. Even though people often use the term climate change instead of global warming due to the rise of Earth's average temperature. But climate change is different in different areas as it is not merely an increase in temperature but also includes the frequency and severity of droughts, floods, hurricanes and blizzards. It is a broader term in the sense that it includes weather changes and outcomes to be promoted as resulting from humanity's impact upon the global climate. So, climate change is more than just the changes in the weather. It is defined IPCC 4, 2007, by any change in climate over time, whether due to natural variability or as a result of human activity. Climate change has also been defined as any natural or stimulated changes in climate, either globally or in a particular area. Parmesan and Yoh, 2003. According to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, climate change is defined as a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the structure of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. Changes in climate refer to changes in means and inconsistency, for example on the temperature, rainfall, and wind which can happen over the course of months to millions of years. So, change in climate refers to changes in atmosphere, gaseous envelope surrounding the Earth, hydrosphere, water on the surface of the Earth, cryosphere, snow, ice, and permafrost on and beneath the surface of the Earth and ocean, land surface, and biosphere, ecosystems and organisms living in the atmosphere, land, and oceans. Nevertheless, the recent and accelerating warming of the Earth's climate is largely attributable to human activity, and its influence are mediated by psychological and social processes, and it can be restricted by human activity. According to the World Health Organization, climate change is estimated to cause over 150,000 deaths annually, and is likely to cause, as it is predicted, approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year between 2030 and 2050 from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress. If global warming and climate change continues at its current pace, the following effects could occur later this century. Figure 10.2 also elaborates on the impact of global warming. 1. Sea levels are estimated to rise between 7 and 23 inches, 18 and 59 centimeters, by the end of the century, and the prolonged melting at the poles could add between 4 and 8 inches, 10 to 20 centimeters. 2. Hurricanes and other storms are likely to become stronger. 3. Species that depend on one another might not be able to survive or may get disturbed. For example, plants could bloom earlier than their pollinating insects become active. 4. Floods and droughts will become more common. Rainfall in Ethiopia, where droughts are already common, could decline by 10% over the next 50 years. 5. Less fresh water will be available. For example, if Quelcaya ice cap in Peru continues to melt at its current rate, it will be gone by 2100, leaving thousands of people who rely on it for drinking water and electricity without a source of either. 6. Chances of becoming ill will increase as some diseases might spread, such as malaria carried by mosquitoes. 7. Ecosystems will get affected, as some species will move farther north and other species might not be able to move, so they could become extinct. Figure 10.2 explains that climate change and global warming have long-term consequences. They are a result of several changes in human activities that accelerated with industrialization in the 19th century and increased exponentially since. The environmental psychologist and scholars expanded their research on environmental degradation in 1980s to adapt and confront climate change and global warming impacts on ecosystem and humans. Thus, several themes in environmental psychology have emerged that are relevant to climate change and global warming, such as 1. A concern in how environmental psychology can inform and aid public policy. 2. Attention to technology and digital means both as a contributor to environmental problems and to improve sustainability. 3. A tendency to value and benefit from multidisciplinary associations and theories from other fields. 4. Expansion of interests to include multiple levels of analyses, from small-scale studies of individuals and small groups to larger-scale issues of sustainability, issues facing non-human biological world, and large-scale ecological problems such as the impending world water crises, food crisis, etc. Furthermore, experts from different fields of psychology and other disciplines can contribute to finding solutions to many problems associated with climate change. This includes talking about issues such as 1. Coping with perceived threats of climate change to trauma stemming from experience of climate-related weather disasters. 2. Experts in community, business, and organizational behavior can address changes necessary at the systemic and human behavioral levels as businesses and non-profit organizations adapt to a changing environment. 3. To provide an understanding of how people across the lifespan can adapt to climate change. 4. To design effective methods to integrate an environmental focus into psychology and other curricula. 5. Experts in international and peace psychology can intervene as intergroup conflicts develop due to decreasing resources and forced migrations associated with a changing climate. Moreover, youth should also be engaged in climate change education. They should also be at the forefront of this change as they are vulnerable and will bear the impacts of climate change over their lifetime. The next section elaborates on educating youth and children on global warming and climate change. 10.1.2 Climate Change Education for Youth. Recent studies have mentioned that children are under-informed and poorly trained regarding topics such as climate change and global warming. Merritt al. 2020. Thus, advocating children and youth from a young age will help children develop a sense of collective competence through the promotion of youth engagement. Involving youth in research is a critical component as their efforts will enhance the quality of data that is used to inform climate change policies and plans. Furthermore, it will empower children to take actions that relate to their future lives. The literature on youth climate change education primarily investigates the impact of educational programming on youth's knowledge. The scholars believe that making sense of climate change is the crucial and the first step to changing behavior. However, the knowledge regarding climate change does not necessarily translate into personal connection or action. It is important to connect the cause and consequences with the personal lives of people so that they understand the impact. Thus, facilitating youth's understanding of the connections between climate change concepts and issues beyond the classroom is necessary for attitude and behavior change. So, for example, if students are encouraged to think about topics such as climate change in relation with their own lives, their concern for the environment grows. Therefore, increased knowledge and connection to climate change can lead to youth's increased enthusiasm and eagerness to engage in pro-environmental behaviors as well as motivate students to act towards change. There are several benefits to youth from engaging creatively and meaningfully with topics such as climate change. 1. It improves their reasoning and discussion skills. Discussion among students from different cultural background and values lead to different viewpoints which might provide richer and more productive climate change discussions. 2. It increases students' engagement in topics related to sustainability such as climate change, global warming, deforestation etc., which further stimulates creatively, increases engagement and diverse problem solving. 3. Sustainability-oriented education aims to cultivate youth's futures thinking by promoting learners to consider the multiple outcomes of their own decisions and actions, and to visualize and reflect upon the potential elements that make up their own future lives. 4. It inspires students and children that they have the power to save the environment, and thus this gives them the power to modify their future. 10.1.3 Education for Action. Educational programs that move from transmissive learning to transformational learning involve youth in various forms of climate change action related to their education. These sorts of programs can typically happen outside the formal classroom or informal settings. Climate change-related educational initiatives seek to engage the whole person by emphasizing knowledge, values, and action that have been advocated under a variety of terms, including environmental education for empowerment and education for sustainability. The goals of action-based educational initiatives are that youth are considered agents of change within their families and communities. They are environmentally empowered and are confident in their own abilities to make a difference in the world by making lifestyle choices and influencing others. They act as catalyst of change in their families and communities and influence others with their engagement with the environment. Thus, involving youth and children in climate change education might make them feel capable of taking action to minimize harm and believe in the transformation of their environments. A conceptual model is presented in Figure 10.3 that explains how children and youth engagement with climate change. Trott, 2019, introduced transformative, arts-based, and participatory approaches as potential avenues for facilitating children's constructive climate change engagement. The educational approaches and literature focus on effective instructional strategies to strengthen children and youth's learning. Children and youth learn about climate change, but very rarely they are given opportunities to act on this information. Thus, to go beyond scientific facts, alternative educational paradigms have arisen that move from transmissive towards transformative learning, which emphasize the social, ethical, and political dimensions of climate change, while encouraging diverse participation and social change action. The art-based methods have been used as a medium through which to foster the civic participation of children and young people in their communities. Art is usually a technique to raise awareness of social issues, resist and rewrite dominant cultural narratives, and facilitate social change action. Even though art-based methods are limited, but they engage young children and youth in creative, participatory processes, for example, visual art, video production, performance, which can eventually serve to empower their agency and to raise awareness of climate change with decision-makers and advocate changes on behalf of their communities. Art encourages meaning-making and self-expression around issues of identity, community, and place, so this medium helps to identify place-based sustainable solutions important to children and their local communities. Action-based methods is acting on learned concepts, which can be an empowering experience for children and youth. So, children engaging with the community to address a local issue or the simple act of imagining preferable futures for their community. To facilitate children's and youth's constructive climate change engagement, participatory methods are best as they help them to bring out their potential and empower them. This method helps to shift the power from adults to children and youth, and they act as key stakeholders and raise their voices. The adults, policy makers, help children and youth to come together as they investigate a problematic situation in order to improve conditions, and they voice and control things that will ultimately impact them. 10.1.4 Urban cities and climate change. Cities are vulnerable to climate change, but they are also uniquely positioned to lead the way in both mitigating and adapting to it. Urban cities and population have a responsibility to transition toward a more sustainable future, as they are a source of most of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Cities are currently home to over half of the global population. In developed regions, that figure is even larger, with nearly 80% of population residing in cities, which makes it more important to adopt sustainable development plans to be able to keep city growth within ecological limits. Temperature in the urban cities rises, and it tends to become hotter than their surrounding suburbs and rural areas because of heat absorption and retention. This happens because of the impervious surfaces, such as concrete, and dense populations, the reduced amount of vegetation and impermeable surfaces. This results in what is known as the urban heat island effect, which is a warming effect in the atmosphere surrounding urbanized areas. Urban heat island causes the temperature to increase, resulting in frequent heat waves and making the cities more vulnerable to climate change. Thus, people should obtain better knowledge about the degree to which the urban heat island is influencing their city, which might help city planners in responding more appropriately to the situation. Furthermore, climate change might increase the risks to health directly from increased injuries and mortality from extreme weather events such as waterborne diseases after flooding, hurricanes, extreme rainfall events. Moreover, the foodborne diseases due to the contact of food to higher temperatures causing bacterial growth, increased mortality from more intense and more frequent heat waves worsened by the urban heat island effect and forced migrations as city dwellers seek shelter from increased conflict over resources. Moreover, respiratory diseases and illnesses from poor air quality and increased allergies related to changes in temperature, precipitation, and the build-up of smog from commercial and industrial practices. Thus, doctors, physicians and members of the healthcare system should be aware of the increased risks to human health in cities and predict climate change-related consequences. They can incorporate this information into healthcare systems to reduce serious health impacts and make recommendations for better understanding of the possible health risks in their area. City infrastructure should be assessed for increased extreme weather events such as storms, flooding, hurricanes, and high winds. The increased frequency of these events will have direct impacts on availability of food and water, human health, and facility operations. Drought conditions aggravated by climate change will exert added stress on cities, especially those who import their water or depend on remote sources to meet their demands. Moreover, as urbanization continues, difficult decisions in urban planning and development will be driven by resource availability and demand for basic resources. Therefore, healthcare system must adapt by anticipating needs and adopting practices that incorporate changing environmental conditions and the associated increased risks. Even though it's difficult to anticipate a natural hazard, but when disasters occur in the human-built environment, that the consequences can be drastic. However, as urbanization and the built environment continues to expand, vulnerability and risk exposure will increase in urban areas. The combination of larger and denser populations with increased infrastructure such as buildings and roads mean that when a disaster does strike in cities, it has a greater capacity to cause more damage, putting important facilities out of operation. Therefore, it is crucial to human health and well-being that disaster reduction plans include the management of these negative consequences of climate change. To address these problems, 3 pillars of sustainability has been illustrated in Figure 10.4. Adapted from Wilkson and Yernikan, 2000. This Venn diagram highlights the importance of not just the environment, but also the economy and society. Each of the pillars is desirable to achieve sustainability. 10.2 Key factors for sustainability. Climate change and increased climate variability will have many negative consequences in the urban environment, but cities management plays a big role in determining its ability to respond to climate change. Thus, it is important to address water and energy-related supplies because without them the cities are forced to import it from different parts of the world, which increase carbon footprint. So, to do that, there is a need for the support of water conservation policy and regulations at all levels to enforce behavioral changes. 2. Sustainable water management can be organized at the city level around 3 major water uses that are drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. 3. Conservation programs must be put in place at local and state level to assign more accountability. 4. Other mitigation efforts in cities might also include water reclamation and recycling or increasing the efficiency of water supply. Another development priority for cities can be to focus on the public transportation sector. Cities make for the most efficient transportation centers because denser populations allow for closer proximity of housing, retail space and employment, reducing traveling distances and supporting alternative travel options. People living in cities can benefit from public transportation in ways that those in rural areas cannot because the necessary infrastructure is already in place. Public transport is a more sustainable means of transportation due to its ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint through the conservation of energy. Another alternative transportation options are walking or bicycling for better physical health, for people who do not want to own their own private vehicle and due to the increasing fuel prices and various other reasons. Accessibility to alternative transportation not only improves public health, but can also addresses air pollution, increasing housing values, contribute to a sense of place and community, promote economic development in the area, and save household money. It can be difficult to persuade people to change their attitude and behavioral patterns towards public transportation over personal automobiles. However, incentives and rewards can be put in place to further develop the transportation sector in a city, which in turn will encourage this behavioral change. For instance, carpooling and sharing platforms reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the cost of traveling as compared to a personal vehicle. Urban waste management is another area which can help protect people and environment from the negative effects associated with waste. Discarded materials that do not seem harmful can potentially become hazardous if not managed properly. So, to run efficiently and sustainably, few steps in the cycle that are waste generation, collection and disposal must be addressed. People need to focus on effectively managing waste and reducing overall outputs of trash so that it will lead to fewer trips to the landfill and help in saving fuel and emissions. Prevention is better, so less trash generation means less energy expenditures towards waste collection, transport, and distribution. So, some points to keep in mind for waste management are: 1. The state and government agencies need to enforce regulations for guiding waste management and educating people about the proper waste management. 2. The government needs to analyze the city's waste consumption pattern and invest their money in more sustainable materials sourced from less carbon-intensive companies and processes. 3. Small businesses, store owners, and individuals can all make commitments in reducing their dependence on material goods, reducing their demand for them, and making informed consumer decisions. The key to good urban waste management is providing waste collection services in a consistent and ethical way. Thus, the government and local agencies need to be tasked with providing services for waste collection and recycling. Moreover, focusing on green infrastructure, that is planting more trees, has been gaining a lot of importance since the last few decades. More information is provided in Box 10.1 regarding green infrastructure in cities and corporates. Box 1, Green infrastructure. Green infrastructure been gaining a lot of attention in recent years for its integration of creative thinking, art and design. Urban areas often lack horizontal space for vegetation, so they can be innovative by incorporating green spaces. Thus, green infrastructure allows a city to address this issue with sustainable urban landscape and other deviseful green practices. They can be used to improve community resiliency, reduce pollution and runoff, and cut back on energy and water supply, all while maintaining the original functionality of the walls, buildings, roofs, etc. Green roofs provide new innovative uses and functionality to spaces that would otherwise go unused. They also increase biodiversity in urban settings by creating habitats for birds and insects, and are an excellent way to apply technologies to grow food in urban settings, creating a sustainable and local source of food. Vertical gardens, or green walls, act similarly to green roofs, having many of the same benefits, but they can be located both outdoors and indoors. For example, implementing green roofs on buildings, houses or corporate buildings, is one way to reduce the urban heat island effect of the local area because the vegetation has an evaporative cooling effect. These green spaces improve the mental health of people as they provide many psychological benefits such as boost morale, improve connection with space, better physical health, etc. Another sustainable landscape is permeable pavement or porous pavement that act as a pavement for vertical gardens, or green walls, act similarly to green roofs, having many of the same benefits, but they can be located both outdoors and indoors. It allows storm water to re-enter the soil rather than being carried around as overflow, which could possibly cause flooding and pollution in urban areas. Permeable pavement helps to manage this issue and allows for improved soil moisture and the natural filtering of water through the soil. Permeable pavement also reduces costs that would otherwise have to be spent on flood damages. 10.3 Carbon footprint. The word carbon footprint can simply be understood as the amount of carbon dioxide emitted to the atmosphere by the anthropogenic activities. The carbon footprint has its origins in the ecological footprint introduced by Wackenagel and Rees in 1996. An ecological footprint refers to the biologically productive area on Earth that is necessary to maintain a person's standard of living. On the other hand, the carbon footprint measures the land area needed to compensate carbon dioxide emissions and equivalents provoked by human activities. It is a measure of the total amount of carbon dioxide and methane emissions of a defined population, system or activity, considering all relevant sources, sinks and storage within the spatial and temporal boundary of the population, system or activity of interest, calculated as carbon dioxide equivalent using the relevant 100-year global warming potential, Wright et al., 2011. It can be measured by the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are directly or indirectly caused by an activity or accumulated over the life stages of a product. Carbon footprint provides a concrete tool for the control of the gasification of our planet. Main sources of greenhouse gas emissions can be identified, and high emissive areas can be reduced when striving for a lower emission policy. By this means, governmental institutions and companies can use this method to assess a product's impact on the environmental. This method provides companies, organizations and universities to investigate their processes and allow businesses to make more efficient decisions. Environmental considerations while developing their business have shown encouraging effects not only on a reductive cost base but also on their corporate social responsibility image, which eventually results in a competitive advantage. Reducing carbon emissions has become a new lifestyle trend that has led to more use of renewable energy. A carbon footprint represents a more substantial tool for the civil society to be aware of individual climate actions. Nowadays, numerous online platforms for calculating individual carbon footprints are also being offered. The main aim of a carbon footprint's calculation is to assess all greenhouse gases emissions of a product's development, including all its steps from the manufacturing of raw materials to production processes, logistic distributions, packaging, retail, consumption and recycling or disposal. Many companies also provide carbon labels. They provide additional information for consumers, but carbon labels are still rare. Carbon labels are designed to help consumers making more climate-friendly purchase choices. Within this eco-label category, the carbon label, CL, also called carbon footprint label or CO2 label, has become an important and communicative tool for the attempt to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It is aimed to visibly transmit the CO2 or CO2e emissions over a product's life cycle to the consumers, giving better choice criteria in their purchase decisions by confronting them with their own environmental consumption impact and generating an improved environmental behavior. Companies have started to apply carbon labels as a way to demonstrate their environmental responsibility and to highlight their products. The label trend can also convince other firms to start cutting their emissions, causing in cost reduction, improved image and reputation. Although carbon labels also exist for companies reporting emissions from their own production processes, labels for product packages are more common since they enclose emissions from a wider supply chain range. Both companies and consumers can be influenced by carbon labels towards a reductive carbon behavior. Increased information interest from the consumer side has given a further reason for the carbon labeling of products. Additionally, labels should include transparency, trustworthiness, completeness, clarity, availability and producer incentive.